23rd of June 2019 on the allotment. It's a bit noisy here. It looks like some new people are taking over one of the overgrown sites, and he's going up and down with his big heavy machine, hacking up all the weeds and things. So what's going on here? It's really nice actually. This is the first summer when I felt I've been on top of everything, and every planting area is planted up, and as soon as things come out, more things go in. And I've had things that I've had nowhere to put them, so they've kind of been fitted into odd corners here and there, which gives it a more natural feel. And I kind of hope that doing this will mean that the predators don't take every single one of anything. I do use slug pellets. If I don't, you certainly notice what happens, particularly if the plants are quite young. Once they reach a certain stage of size and toughness, and I'm not sure what that is, but it's not the baby ones, the birds leave them alone then. For example, this is the garlic bed. I took the garlic out and put it to dry because it was beginning to burst open. And I've planted various odd things. Well, this is a courgette. Went in rather late, and I've put this piece of plastic around it to protect it from the slugs and snails. It still looks a bit pale, but it's got to spread its roots out. And for the rest of the bed, I've put some celeriac there, and there, and there, and there. And in between the celeriac, I put some odd brassicas that I had in pots that I no longer know what they are. And this is what happens. Something comes and nibbles the leaves. I've nibbled some of that. And this one's almost bare of leaves. The spare brassicas that we put in here, they're okay. I think we actually slug pelleted this area fairly heavily, so nothing's managed to get at those. And there were 3 that I put here, and I don't think I did pellet these. And the one at the front was particularly small and weedy, especially after I took the net off. And I didn't think it would survive, but actually it got going. And now it's big enough that I don't think the predators will be able to have it. And look about, this one, it's actually created a little cauliflower in there. I don't think it'll grow any bigger than that, but it's a good size. There's another brassica. I'm not sure if it is a cauliflower or something else. It's been nibbled a little bit, but it's holding its own. This one's been chewed up rather more. And this one, I planted this in the soft earth from a mole cast, and it seems to be doing okay. I don't know why nothing's eaten that one. This is the other achocha, the Bolivian giant. I've got the one growing in the conservatory, and this one I've planted out. And this thing is like a moat with no drawbridge, so the slugs and snails can't get in, but I've put pellets in anyway because it's a very tender looking plant, and I would hate for it to be chewed up before it gets a chance. These are the remains of the Stuttgarter giant onions. Not looking too bad. I don't know if this one's leaning. It feels quite firm in the ground, so hard to know. The runner beans are finally beginning to wind their way up the poles and producing a few flowers down at the bottom. The chickpeas have bushed out a lot, and they're beginning to flower. So we'll see what happens there, whether I get chickpeas or no chickpeas. And the corn has taken hold and is starting to grow. That's the mini pop. And over there is the full-size sweet corn. This is my first bed of beans that I planted without any added nutrients, and they went very yellow and took a while to get going. And then I hacked up a couple in the middle by mistake when I was weeding, and I put a couple more in, so they're quite small still, but they are growing. Oh, chickweed everywhere. This is the next bed of beans I planted, and they are thriving, except for the ones at the edges, which I planted a bit later. I added some extra plants on. The beans are black, and the flowers are a beautiful purple. These are also the black beans, which I planted a few weeks later, I suppose, and they're still looking a bit yellow and weedy, but you can see some of them are beginning to bush out. And this is the final bed, and they're still looking very yellow. And the ones at the edges have been chewed up probably by slugs, but I'm just leaving them to their own devices. They've got a nice mulch of straw and they'll either make it or they won't. These are climbing beans. They have a mind of their own. I tie them near the canes, hoping that they'll climb up, and they just wave their way around. They will do it in their own time if the wind doesn't break them off. And these are the same kind, but I planted them a bit later. They're looking a bit yellower, you can see the contrast there. But they've already got their root systems going and they're preparing to wind their way up the poles. I think it did make a difference that I wrapped a bit of netting around the teepee to protect them when they were first in the ground. It gave them a bit of a start and they weren't pecked up by the birds. These are the 2 cabbages left over from winter, and since we had the heavy rain, they have, I think, started to heart up a little bit. Somebody suggested I should take away some of the big leaves, but I think the big leaves are what's supplying the food for them, so I don't really want to do that. Yes, that one's definitely got a heart. Those are climbing peas. This is the first row of peas I planted that I thought would never get going because they kept getting chewed up. So I planted another lot, and I think I've got 2 different kinds here. This one is definitely fleshier and growing taller, and this is a little stubby one. You can see they're still getting eaten by something, but once they get going, I think they grow faster than they can be eaten. Oh, that's the very latest teepee of beans that I planted, and I didn't even bother with slug pellets for these, and the birds have not had too much. I think they had a leaf off here, but mostly they're okay. I think they're going to start to climb soon as well. There are 2 rows of new potatoes. This one is the ones I've taken already. It was very easy to get the potatoes out of the ground with this, well, it's compost, and now it's got the wood chips mixed in because we didn't quite have enough compost and we had to put wood chips on top, and now they're all mixed in. I intend to plant leeks here. I'm not sure how they'll do with all these wood chips. We'll just have to see. It's the only place they can go now, really. And some of these potatoes were chewed by rats. There's the remains of one. I am a bit concerned about these rats. We've only had them since last year, and it seems to me it has some correlation with the fact that the people who live at the bottom of the allotments have been throwing their leftover dinner, or their, pasta and potatoes and even meat, all sorts of stuff. They've been throwing over the fence, supposedly for the birds, the seagulls. And I'm pretty sure it must be encouraging the rats. I should have a word with them sometime about it. I mean, I'm all for helping wildlife and saving on waste, but I don't know where you draw the line. I mean, even rats have a right to live, I suppose. It depends how many of the potatoes they actually eat. The beans got blown over a bit in the gale last week. These are the European beans. They're very small, but they're tender and not as strong tasting as the big ones. So I'm in 2 minds whether to grow more next year. They grow really well, and they've cropped really well. It's a nuisance podding them because they're so small. But I think on balance they're probably worth doing. These are the sweetheart cabbages. We've had 3, I think, so far. After the heavy rains last week, they really did heart up, which is good, because if they had already hearted up, then the rain would have made them burst. But as it is, they're just doing really as they should do. And this one I've cut, but I've left the leaves because it covers the ground and stops weeds growing until we've finished. There are 2 red gooseberry bushes which I have netted because the birds seem to go more for the red ones than the green ones, and we haven't got enough nets for all of them. There's a green one still full of fruit. We'll see what happens in a week or 2 as they ripen up. This is one of the Styrian pumpkins I planted on the compost heap inside one of these little slug protecting tubes, and it's beginning to take off. Over here is the other one, and in the middle, this is a cucumber. I think it was the shock of planting it out that's caused the leaves to shrivel up. It's still got some good leaves, and it's protected inside this plastic thing, fortress. So I hope it'll begin to take off once it gets its roots into the compost. That's the other cucumber, which I planted in the ground, and I've given it a net to climb up. I'm not sure if it's going to climb up it or if it's just going to shoot its way into the corner, but it's got the chance anyway. This is a large bed of Brussels sprouts, and up this end, broccoli or calabrese, I can't remember which. I'm going to have to take the net off the Brussels sprouts at some point because it's stretched too thin and they've not got room to grow. But it's given them a start anyway. The jostleberry cage is almost complete. I've just got to help Chris with the last piece of net.
That's the last bit. I've got to put a couple more nails in just to stop it flapping about. And then one net complete.
The apple tree's having a rest year. But look at all these plums in here. That's the moth trap. So there's the hazel hedge. They've been in 2 years now. This is their second summer, most of them. There's 3 of them. This is their first summer. That one there, and that one, and that one. You can see what a difference a year makes. Squirrels have probably got their eye on them already. Oh, and here's a damson tree with a few damsons. That's an asparagus beetle. I keep picking them off, but it's a lost cause really. There's thousands of them, and they've been laying their little tiny eggs, and there are grubs on the asparagus already. Looking like little dirty poos on the tips of the branches. So there are the tomatoes planted outdoors. You can see they're not as big as the ones in the polytunnel. This is the bed I designated for the peppers next to the tomato. The thing is, I planted a load of little pepper plants and I didn't put slug pellets around, and this is the result. So here are some reinforcements. This is one that somebody gave me, which is a chili snake. So that's a chili pepper. And I've made sure to slug pellet this, and you can see something's had a go and been put off, shall we say. This is another chili plant that he gave me, and this is a red pepper which I'm also going to slug pellet. I know it seems mean to poison the creatures, but there's such a lot of wildlife around here. I can't see it making any big impression on the birds and the snakes and lizards and things. Maybe it does, but I can't not have plants. So those are the last potatoes. Some beetroots, some carrots, some, they're celeriac again. And in between the celeriac and the carrots there's a row of tiny little leeks, which are small but growing. This is today's harvest, some white cherries. I think the birds were a bit confused because they don't look ripe. They are not as red as the normal red cherries, and so they left them for us, which was very considerate of them because the net is not up yet. So that's it for this time. See you later. Bye.